I said I wasn't going to do that for the second service, but I couldn't let you guys find out that I did it in the first service and didn't do it for the second. So I was born Mark Thomas Treen in 1978. My parents told me they gave me the name Mark to be informal to use like when I was growing up. But when I grew up, I needed to started using the word, or they suggested I could use the word Thomas so I could like put it on my office door so it seemed really official. Well, that's not on my office door now. There is a big poster from you guys, from some of the parents and kids, saying how much they appreciate me. Because I'm the children's director here, like Pastor Will said. And I am married to Heidi, and we have one son, Luke, and it's okay to say aw. I know that's the typical human response when you see a picture like that. And in contrast to human, I want to let you know that you may see me act a little robotic this morning. And if you think that I'm a little robotic sometimes, I have to tell you, thank you, because robots were kind of my heroes when I was a little kid, two robots in particular. And one was famous by saying that he wasn't very good at telling stories, at least to make them entertaining. And he later, in episode 6, told some very interesting stories. So I hope that's what you're going to hear this morning. And it's not going to be like a regular sermon like Pastor Will said, but I do hope that you, in our shared human experiences, find some similarities that are not just painful, but that are joyful, but at least they bring you a little bit closer in your walk with God. And the slide up there says that my life started in an unbroken world. And that's not like theologically true. I did grow up in a broken world, but that's not what it felt like. I had an amazing childhood, and it did not feel like a broken world. And I want to let you guys know that if you've asked Jesus to save you, that him and his Father, they are preparing for you, just for you, particularly for you, a special aspect of an unbroken world that you'll get to live in forever with everyone else who's asked him to save them. And so I hope that this morning when I tell these next few silly stories that you can get a glimpse of that. Although maybe not accurate, but just you'll at least learn about my childhood. So on that horse country in Central Florida, I was raised on a farm, a thoroughbred farm in Ocala. That word's hard for me to say. And I would go everywhere barefoot. And kind of like a famous hobbit who became a burglar, I learned how to dodge and weave through the sticks and even the spiky acorns and eventually even the crunchy leaves, getting everywhere I needed to go so I could be super silent. At night when I needed to use the restroom as a little kid, I don't do this anymore, but I would get from my bed to the potty and back, never having turned on a light. I saw my cat do it, and I thought it was pretty cool, and I challenged myself, and I got a little bit better and a little bit better every night. You see, there wasn't anything in that dark house that I knew that wanted to harm me. There wasn't anything in my life that wanted to harm me as a little kid. It was an unbroken world. Everywhere I went, whether it was a cat that I could scratch until it purred, or a dog that I could kiss on its cold, wet nose, that means the dog's healthy, or a horse that I could scratch, I made friends with everything I went by, every animal I went by. My parents participated in this unbroken world. My mom and dad were from Canada, so they really liked to have hot English traditional tea, which includes milk. And so one day when I was opening the fridge way too fast, I later learned it was called gravity, but I saw an egg accelerating at 9.8 meters per second toward the mobile home's linoleum floor. And as it exploded, so did my hopes of that tea. My mom walked over, and I remember her looking down at me because I was very short then. I wasn't this tall. And I looked up at her, and I actually have a picture of that moment. I looked up at her, and I said the now famous line, does this mean I can't have any tea? And when she responded in a way, I'm 45 now. I don't know how old I was in that picture, but she responded in a way that that was the moment that I learned everything I needed to know about compassion. Because she said in a laugh that showed me that question was ridiculous. She said, "Of course not. Of course I could have that tea." And that's how my siblings treated me. That's how my animals treated me. That's how my teachers treated me. And I'm going to tell some not so fun stories about my mom and about my dad, but I do want to tell you that my dad was an amazing person. Everywhere he went, whether he knew the kids or not, he would make sure that he would make them laugh with silly faces or silly voices. And he was a very hard worker, and he made sure that he instilled that in my brother and I. And he knew the value of money, and he made sure that he instilled that in my brother and I. My brother is he still is a year older than me, because every time I get older, he gets older too. So he still is a year older than me, and he still loves to read science books, and I still love to lay on dogs just like that and ponder. And I was fortunate because even though I was extremely competitive with Robert, he loved to teach. He still loves to teach. And he would teach me the math and science he was learning a year ahead of time. So it's a big part of my story that those things came natural to me. My sister is 7 years older than me. So she kind of took care of us growing up, my brother and I. She cooked a lot of the meals. My mom worked a lot. And when I was a little kid, my mom's parents, who I call Nana and Fufu, which Fufu is the way my toddler sister tried to say the word Russell, which is his first name. Nana and Fufu retired for being missionaries in Zimbabwe. This is Zimbabwe. And they moved to Florida to be near us. And they made sure we went to church like good missionaries do. And so I started going to Sunday school, and my grandmother told me I needed to be saved. I needed to ask Jesus to save me. So even though I slept on the top bunk bed, I climbed on the bottom bunk bed one day, and I remember curling up in a ball. I don't know why, but I asked God to save me. But I do remember why, from that moment, not until now, but for a long time, whenever I had to change my clothes, I would make sure I did it under the covers, because I knew God was watching me. And it's funny how the knowledge of God isn't the same thing as actually knowing Him Himself. And when I was 11, we moved from a horse farm in Florida to subdivision in Southern California. And it was around this time in 6th grade, I remember making a conscious, that's a word I can't say, cautious, purposeful decision when I was hanging out with nerdy and cool kids, that the cool kids just kind of treated each other not so nice, and they were okay with it, and that seemed illogical to me. So I decided to be a nerd, and I still appreciate that decision to this day. And I do want to share a portion of John 16:33 with you. I'm sorry. Before I do that, I want to ask you, where was God in that area of my life? Well, it's pretty obvious. He was evident in creation. He was evident in my mom's compassion. He was evident in just how He allowed me to have comfort from all these things that are part of His creation, like animals and siblings and Nintendo NESs. But I do want to share this portion of this verse from John 16:33, and it says, "In this world you will have trouble." And I don't have to tell you that, but it's in the Bible. It's true. And this next part's a little hard for me to share, but on my 13th birthday, my dad came to pick me up from my friend's house after school, and he told me, "Mommy's leaving us." No, he said, "Mommy's leaving me." But it felt like he said, "Mommy's leaving us." And my 13-year-old heart didn't know what to do with that. I remember the way I would handle it was the way I kind of handled all stress in life, which is I just kind of like try to hide myself, get away, literally put my head under my pillow. I don't know if that's a saying or not, but I would hide my head under my pillow. I would climb under the blankets. And when I was a little kid, I would do that. And after a little while of cool-off time, my mom would always come over and start rubbing my back. Well, she was there to rub my back, and she wanted to, but I didn't want her to come over and rub my back. And I, unfortunately, with the encouragement of my dad, I decided the right course of action was to start mistreating my mom. And so the way a passive-aggressive, reclusive person do that is I decided I would just not talk to her. So I was living with my mom, and I didn't talk to her for a day. And then a little bit later, I didn't talk to her for a week. And then a little later, I didn't talk to her for a year. That's something from my childhood, but we've all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. And where was God in that time in my life when my world was seemingly ending? Well, Pastor Mike was in our area in Agua Dulce, Southern California, and we didn't go to his church, but he invited me to go horseback riding with him once a week. And so that's what I did. I would spend about an hour brushing down his horse, tacking it up, with my very toothpicky arms, putting the 50-pound saddle up on the horse, and we would go riding together in a literal oasis in the middle of a desert. And he would ask me about the divorce. And I think that things were starting to get a little bit better. Maybe I was treating my mom a little bit better. But he actually told Pastor Mike that he couldn't talk to me about the divorce anymore. So Pastor Mike pivoted really amazingly, and he decided that he asked me to read a chapter in Genesis every day, and then we would talk about it every week. So there was 13-year-old Mark going through all the stuff I was just talking about, in that setting that I just described, literally riding horses, and able to go through every hard question that should come up with all of you, with all of us, as we read Genesis the first time. Something that I discovered looking back at that time is, even though it was a hard time, it's something that I've told myself over and over and over again, because I've experienced it over and over again, is that God is sweet. God is gentle. And I add one thing, that he always has a plan. I'd like to share with you Psalm 42:1. This is the first part of it. It says, "As a deer pants for streams of water, so my soul thirsts after you, O God." And that describes well my middle school and high school years, except only half of that does, because I was panting, but I wasn't seeking after God. But I do want to tell a fun story before I tell the rest of that area of my life, because around this time my sister got married, and I remember I was asked for some reason to watch the kids there at the wedding reception. And I remember I didn't really know what to do with kids, but it was fun to run, and they would chase me, and then they would laugh, and I would dodge and weave, and they would laugh more. And I just remember thinking, and that was me in that bright white gator sweatshirt. I just remember thinking how joyful it was to make kids laugh, and how it kind of made me think that I could kind of do that like my dad would always do, making kids laugh. But yeah, so in high school, I met some older friends that had cars, that I was taller than them, but I was younger than them, so I always had to sit in the back seat. They treated me nice, but I always was in the back seat. It didn't matter if it was a 4-door car or a 2-door car, and I was almost 6'4" at the time, crumpling up in the back and just feeling like, a little bit of a, I don't know what the right human phrase for that is, but a little bit awkward. And it felt even more that way when I went to high school, and because I was hanging out with people who didn't go to high school anymore, I didn't really have anybody to hang out with at school. Well, it wasn't just that reason. It was also because I was very antisocial and a nerd and didn't like to talk to people. But for all those reasons, I didn't have people to talk to at lunch. And so I remember just getting my lunch and and like not knowing where to sit. Like, is it okay if I sit by you? I don't know you. Do I sit by myself? And then everyone's looking at me like he's sitting by himself. And so I developed a strategy, which I do not recommend. I found the longest line, which was for Pizza Hut. And I realized that if I waited about 5 minutes after lunch started, I could get in line, and then I could spend the whole lunch just waiting in line. And it wasn't like awkward. No one knew I was doing that. And I did it for a while. And I want to let you know that to this day, God still calls me to those who are alone and who don't look connected. And that if you come to students, I do volunteer, serve at students, and I usually wear this hat. And you as a student, or you as a parent who have a student, or a grandparent who has a student, just want to let you guys know that if you come and you just don't kind of know who to hang out with, come over to me, and I'm going to take you to a table over there, and we're going to get and play with a card game, and you'll get to play with other people who are not 45, I promise. We'll get some other people to come over and play a game. That's just something that God developed in my heart. Well, my brother was a year older than me. He was smarter, faster, stronger, way a harder worker than me, and he graduated from high school. He got a job. He started college. He moved out of the house, and he was really struggling. And if Robert was struggling, I knew I could not do that. So I joined the Navy. I was 6'4". I am 6'4", but I also was 6'4". Both statements are true. I was 142 pounds. Do you guys see it? No, I'm about 50 pounds heavier now. So imagine me losing 50 pounds. And going to boot camp where they needed you to do push-ups, which I could do 0. So that was a struggle, needless to say. So where was God during that struggle? Well, I'll tell you, Nana would write me letters while I was in boot camp. And every mail drop, I got multiple letters from Nana. And they would say, I love you, all the normal grandma stuff. I'm so proud of you. But it also would give these really strategic and amazingly true Bible verses, which I had a Bible verse memorized at that time. It was the one in Pulp Fiction. I got to boot camp and I borrowed someone's Bible and I found out that's not really a real Bible verse. And I'm like, man, I'm batting 0 right now. But so I got these verses from my grandmother, and they were just like gave me peace and like gave me comfort. And it wasn't actually God himself. It was just like in that direction that gave me peace and gave me comfort. But remember that God is always sweet and he's always gentle, and he always has a plan. So in 1996, I graduated from boot camp, and the Navy sent me to nuclear A school in Orlando, Florida. Went to A school, went to power school, and I was, remember, I liked math and science, so I did really well there, and I applied for an officer program, and then after a year of those schools, they send you to prototype, where you learn how to operate a nuclear reactor, which was right here in Charleston. No, I didn't meet Heidi right here. But I did get this really hard checkout. A checkout is it's a mini interview where you prove to somebody that you know everything about a system, and they sign off that you know that ship system. And I remember I asked other people for the answer, and nobody knew the answer. And I had to dive into the manuals. I had to spend literally hours in the library poring over the manual for this system, and I finally found one sentence that gave me the answer, and I'd like to share with you what the cause of the speed droop on a ship's service turbine generator is. Do you guys want to know? Well, it's classified. I can't tell you. But I can tell you about 4 car rides and a deer. So I did finish that school, and I actually got accepted into an officer program. They sent me to Oregon State University to get a bachelor's in science in radiation health physics. That's like keeping humans safe from radiation, which is not as useful in this job as it was in my previous job. But my Nana told me I needed to connect with a college Christian group, and I listened to my Nana. So I did that. I used the good old yellow pages, and I arranged for Pastor Jerome Leonard to come over to a house that was right off of campus. And as we were talking, it was only like 15 or 20 minutes, but the house got under attack. It was under attack by hooting and hollering college kids driving up onto the lawn, because they were getting ready for a night of beach worship. And I didn't know what that was. It sounded like kind of weird, but I liked the beach, so that was cool. And I was fortunate that I didn't get invited by the hooting and hollering guys, but a calm guy, Tim Hansen, offered to give me a ride in his Honda Accord. And as I was walking up to it, I saw another lady walking up, and her name was Jennifer Curtis. It's now Jennifer Hansen. So you probably imagine he had some reason why he wanted her to sit in the front seat. But they both asked me to sit in the front seat. And it was just really weird. Like, me? You don't know me? You want me to sit in the front seat? And the whole way there, they just wanted to get to know me. And that was car ride one. I was hooked on Christian friends immediately, first week in college. And that first summer, and that night at the beach, I had to lip sync all the songs. Fortunately, it was night, so no one could tell. And that's kind of how my whole first summer went. I just kind of faked my way through. I hung out with Christians, but I faked being a Christian. And I remember car ride 2, pulling up toward the end of the summer. On my 5-disc CD changer, I had the four good albums from Metallica. And I had one particular song blaring really, really loud, and I turned it down. I just realized it was a habit now. I turned it down, hit FM radio, and go to K-Love 98.3 in Corvallis, Oregon. Because after church, I would give rides to people in my car, and I wanted them to think I was a Christian, right? And that sermon that day, I remember the pastor said you could do something. And I like to think about decisions that I make, so I thought about it. And that Monday, I was driving my, 1991, always polished, maroon Toyota Cressida down the street to my class with trees going by either way. The Oregon State University campus is absolutely beautiful. And I asked God to save me. And I asked Jesus to be the Lord of my life. And I'm telling you, literally, every morning after that, I felt like it was Christmas morning. I felt like I had this new person to talk to. I had this new person that accepted me, that forgave me. I had this new person that I could learn about. I like learning. And that's where car ride 4 happened, because I quickly decided I needed to start talking to my mom about all the stuff that had happened. And so we talked over email, and then she needed to fly into Seattle so I could drive her up to Canada so we could meet her parents, Nana and Fufu. Fufu was in a nursing home. We needed to travel up and meet them. And on that car ride, we discussed all the stuff that had happened in that early time in our lives, in my life, and forgiveness was easy. She didn't actually need to forgive me, she said, because she never held it against me, which is just amazing. And I do want to let you know that was a 1968 Mustang convertible, cherry red, that I borrowed from my friend, Jeff Ammon, who I found out a few years ago, he was the only nuclear officer I know of, because he got assigned to be an individual augmentee to Afghanistan. So even though he was a nuke submarine officer, he went to Afghanistan. And he's the only one I know of to die as a nuclear officer. He was killed by IED. But it was his Mustang convertible that we were borrowing that was cherry red. The symbology of that, I just feel like it's powerful, because that forgiveness that I was able to give my mom didn't actually come from me. It came from Jesus dying and knowing that I was accepted, knowing that I was forgiven. So new Christian, what do you do with a new Christian in a college group? Well, you get them involved in what they called accountability groups. We call huddles. Tim Hansen offered to meet with me once a week. We would sit and we would chat about life and the Bible and pray. And he allowed me to kind of just like expose everything that I was thinking, and he would tell me what the Bible says about that. And around this time, there was an older couple in our college group. Their names were Virgil and Carolyn. And Carolyn just saw something about me, and she asked to start meeting with me too. And she would ask me questions about my childhood, and ask me questions about feelings. and then show me Bible verses and pray. She was a little bit older than my mom. She had lived a long life, was full of wisdom, and something happened. Pretty soon afterwards, I was watching my niece and nephew, and we were watching the movie Bambi. And even though I had to shut down all my emotions when I decided to stop talking to my mom, I had to stop feeling everything, the bad and the good and everything. Well, I saw this silly movie about a deer, Bambi, and like at the beginning, something sad happened, and I started crying. Well, I hadn't cried in a long time. And then the skunk said something silly, and I started laughing, and then I started crying. And then I started crying because I was crying with happiness. And then, I was a new Christian, I realized I can talk to God about all this stuff, and I started crying all over again. I'm glad it was only like a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old who were in the room with me at the time. And I actually have a picture of that first time I was crying. That's my cat Spot. But like I said, I attacked the knowledge of God like learning a new nuclear reactor, diving into the books. And the knowledge of God isn't the same thing as actually knowing Him, like we already said. And I heard around this time this saying that you would say is cliche. The problem is it's true, is that Christianity isn't a religion, it's a relationship. And it was around this time, Virgil led a small group where we would go through a book of the Bible called the Psalms, which I had never really given any time or effort into because it didn't seem super practical to me. But it's a book of poems and songs written by all these people a long time ago. And something happened because a guy in our group challenged us to memorize them. And I don't know who else did, but I liked that kind of like scholastic aspect of that. So I started memorizing them. And I had just gotten this CD, and it was Irish hymns, but it was instrumental. Instrumental means you don't like know what to think about, and I didn't really know what the songs were. So I'd lay in my bed, petting the stray cat that I would allow to jump up onto my chest, and I would be falling asleep in my college room, and with a little card, listening to Irish hymns, instrumental, and started to memorize Psalm 1. And it was very practical. And it showed me some things about God and how if I treat Him this way, then this will probably happen. And that was cool. And then I memorized Psalm 5. And I saw that I could reach out to God. I could talk to Him. And then I memorized Psalm 27. And I saw that there's joy in this relationship with God. And I could experience that joy. And I could talk to Him about this joy. And then I memorized Psalm 42. And I saw that I can have despair and talk to God about it. And talking to God isn't give me happiness. It's way more real than that, Psalm 42 is. You actually talk to your soul about what you should be talking about. And as I memorized them, I started getting this voice, a voice that allowed me to start with that psalm, to start a conversation with God, but it didn't end with just the words from the psalm. I would talk to Him using the way that the psalmists were talking to God. I could talk to Him about all that stuff. Psalm 51, I could start rooting out the sin in my life, and as I rooted it out, I had a conversation I could have with God about how He feels about my sin, how I should feel with Him regarding my sin. Psalm 139, I wish I could talk a lot longer about Psalm 139. Very special to me, just showing me who God is, how He never leaves me, and that He thinks you are beautiful. And that's really easy for me to say. And it's really easy for me to feel, too. Because that's right in Psalm 139. I finished college, and I actually got stationed back in Charleston to go to Power School again, but this time as an officer, and I didn't need my Nana to tell me this. I got involved in a college Christian group, and it was called Genesis. And Jeremy introduced me to her after one night of Genesis. I remember she was standing in the back. He introduced me to this pretty blonde girl, and she wasn't pretty blonde. She was pretty and blonde. I just want to make sure that's clear because the English language is kind of tricky. But she was wearing a red handkerchief, and I just thought it was kind of unusual. I was impressed because no other lady there was covering their head in like this churchy service. And I later asked her about that red handkerchief, and she told me her very spiritual answer of why she was wearing it that day on her head. So we made sure that we went to Ryan's, to a restaurant with all the groups of friends that were going that night at the same time. And we came into Ryan's at the same time. Nobody else was there. So when she went to pay for her food, I paid for it. And she just said like thank you. And I gave her a line that I highly recommend because to this day it's 100% effective because it's only been used once, I guarantee you, and it worked. I said, well, I'm active duty military and you pay taxes. You can see where this is going. So you actually paid for your own meal. So I don't know if it was that pickup line or it was my sweatpants and my sandals with socks because I went to school in Oregon. She saw something about me, but it was a year later that I want to tell you the happiest moment of my life. I was standing on an altar and the doors opened and my bride came walking toward me. And I was so thankful that I could cry with joy on that moment when I saw her face, her beautiful, beautiful face walking toward me. Well, after our honeymoon, I got stationed on my first submarine, the USS Maine, which is a ballistic missile submarine. Think driving around an RV, because that's exactly what it's like. The coffee, a little bit of it went down my trachea instead of my esophagus, so give me a second. So it was on that first underway that I had another magical, happy moment because we were gone for 3 months right after I was married. Obviously, I missed Heidi. And my friend called me over to the periscope, which I wasn't allowed to be on at this moment because we were passing the pier. And I trained the periscope. I put it in, this is high power. I put it in high power, and I trained it over, and I'm 6'4". So I trained it over, and I saw Heidi on the parking lot, and she was running to get to where the sub was going to pull in. And that feeling of her running to me. And friends, I want to let you know that if you've made mistakes in your life, that's actually how God treats you. You come back to him, and he will run, unabandoned, unashamed, didn't care who was looking, he's going to run to you. And about 5 years later, our son was born, and I remember the moment looking through a viewfinder of a digital camera because I wanted to get it recorded. I reached out and touched his head for the first time, just being overwhelmed by happiness. I looked up to see if I'm where I am in time, and I just realized I'm really far behind. I was, my first boat, I was spiritually healthy, being in a small group that is very similar to our missional communities here. I was reading the Bible. I had friends on my boat who would help me to be talking, reminding me to talk to God through hard times. And it was just an absolute joy serving on a submarine. I really, really enjoyed that time. Went to shore tour, went to second tour. I was a department head now of the USS Missouri, which is a fast attack, very new technology. So think like, Corvette. And it was a new construction, so it's still under construction, and it needed to go out to sea trials. Very hard time in the life of a submarine. Really, the submarine doesn't care. It's the people who work on the submarine who have a really hard time. And I was able to accomplish that mission in the portions that I needed to do. Immediately afterwards, the tempo of that job just got really, really demanding. So much so that I didn't feel like I was failing. I was failing in my job, and I felt like I was going to get fired. And so I actually did what you don't do in the Navy, you don't do in the military, is I quit. Well, that made it so that even though I had 16 years in the Navy, I failed to promote to the next rank. and I wasn't going to be able to get to the magical 20 years, which is where you start getting retirement. So I resigned my commission. Heidi Googled it and found out this loophole. I could resign my commission, go for an officer to enlisted, half my pay, but finish my last 4 years and still be able to retire. And that's what I did. And so my next shore tour was back on a submarine base where everybody didn't know me, but they knew the insignia that was on my chest, and they knew that it did not match the insignia on my shoulders. And so they would come up and ask me my story, and daily, not daily, multiple times a day, I was felt insulted, but I was absolutely humiliated as I had to rehash this story of my failure over and over and over again. And you would ask, where is God in a time when he's allowing his son, his precious son that he loves very much, to be insulted and feel humiliated? Well, he was doing something really, really, really important. He was teaching me humility. He was teaching me that I could approach God in this way where I felt just broken down and alone and hurt. And I could use all these Psalms that I had memorized before that meant a lot back then when I was dealing with like silly stuff, but now they just were so, so powerful. And I'd like to share with you Psalm 42:1 that says, as the deer pants for streams of water, so my soul thirsts after you. Well, I had learned to thirst after God, but I want to share with you, friends, that this is not a verse that you want to put like in happy font, like a Disney print. This is because a dog pants when they're thirsty, a deer pants when they're about to die. And that's when I learned how to approach God, is in absolute despair, in absolute constant humiliation. I learned to embrace the humiliation, and I learned to talk to God. And I could relate a little bit better to the things that maybe Jesus went through. I could relate to other people around me who felt this kind of common human experience of failure. I can share those emotions with you right now if you shared them with me. 2016, I did retire. We decided that we would buy a house here in Cane Bay so it could be near my wife's family. I interviewed for a job. I joined this church, and as I joined, they asked me to be the children's guy. And it was at that time I started meeting with Pastor Joel once a week in Chick-fil-A. Very different. And we would do, it was kind of like a huddle, but it was kind of like a mini job interview every week. But I remember saying something to him because I wanted to impress him. I said, Luke reads the Bible. I can get him to read the Bible, but how do I get him to like reading the Bible? And he was polite, and he didn't say anything. And I remember are you going to give me advice? Like, you're a pastor. Come on, man. So I asked him, and when I asked him, I realized I kind of wanted to pull it back because I knew what the answer was. But he was gentle in how he said it. He didn't say it this way, but he basically said, Mark, if you want Luke to enjoy reading the Bible, you need to enjoy reading the Bible. So I appreciate that advice because it really helped me to have a joy-filled time with him every day. But I did experience trauma from my time in the Navy, that last tour and that last submarine, because much less now, almost never now, but a lot when I first got out and for years, I would wake up at like 3 a.m. in the middle of a dream about a scenario that was mostly true about something that had happened on that last boat, and I would be physically sweating as I was trying to resolve it in my dream, and then I would remember it so vividly, I felt like even though it wasn't true anymore, it's just 5 years later, 4 years later, I felt like I had to relive, I had to finish the scenario that I was presented, and I had to confront the person who was confronting me with the words that I had to say correctly, and I would go over and over and over that conversation until I felt like I had the right answer. And by this time, it was 7 a.m. or 6 a.m., and I had to get up. And I have learned a verse that's helped with that. I don't have it up on the screen, but it's out of Philippians. It says, finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, if anything is lovely or admirable or excellent or praiseworthy, think about these things. Don't think about the things that are not true or that are not pure or lovely or admirable. Our brains are wired to think about things that fulfill all those things in that Philippians verse. And I want to let you know, friends, that if you've identified with some part of my story this evening, you have heard about God, you associate comfort toward Him, but you haven't asked Him to save you. If you have asked Him to save you, but He seems distant, and you just approach Him like a good, like you're discovering a nuclear reactor, not getting to know a person. Or maybe you've approached Him and you really wanted to get to know Him, but you just don't enjoy Him. Or you did enjoy Him, but you don't anymore. If that's you this morning, I want to let you know, please ask for help. Because there's people like Tim Hansen that are here in this church, like Carolyn, like Virgil, like Pastor Mike, and like other people in my story that I said that are actually here. And just the brother sitting next to you right now, or the sister sitting next to you right now, or across the aisle that you haven't met yet, might be that Tim Hansen for you. And I want to let you know that we are starting equip classes, like they said, and that's a great way to get to know somebody, so it's not so awkward that you're meeting with them once a week. And so you can still sign up for those. You can use the Connect card in front of you to sign up for a huddle partner. That's what we call it here. And I have some other things I'd like to share. Just that John 16:33, the whole thing says, "I have told you these things so that you can have peace because of me. In this world you'll have trouble, but be encouraged. I have won the battle over the world." And Pastor Joel last week, he encouraged you guys to read the psalm that matches the date on the calendar, and you could share that on our family Facebook page or Joel's personal page. And I would encourage you to keep doing that if you started. If you haven't, to start. But also, if one speaks out to you, like Psalm 5 did to me as a college person, to be a little bit like that guy who got asked that question, and he dove in until he found that answer. And by that, I mean memorize that psalm. Memorize the first line, start there, and then the next one, and then the next one, and the next one, until you get all the way to the end. And I promise you that it'll pay dividends for you for the rest of your life, for your joy, for the reason why you're here, is glorifying God and experiencing God's joy. And it will pay dividends just like that for everybody around you, especially your future kids or your present kids or your grandkids, for your spouses, for your friends. It'll pay richly dividends. And if you don't mind, I'm going to pray for us, and I'm going to do it like I kind of do with the kids sometimes. I'm gonna pray like I'm you, and I want you to pray with me and pray the words that I'm saying if they apply to you.